And so this is some of the misinformation in which we've found ourselves. And I'd like in today's time together to help you all reflect on what is your area of scientific expertise and what are opportunities you might have to leverage that in the service of the church and in the gospel, in the ministry of the gospel. I'd like to think about some of the literature that pertains to this issue for a moment. A few papers that I've looked into to give us a little background. We make sense of complex data through probabilities. For example, 39% of US adults have a great deal of confidence that scientists will act in the best interests of the public. Only 39%, I might point out. So that's an example of a proportion that we will use to make comparisons. Okay. The ability of the public to benefit from this kind of mathematical information depends on their numeracy or ability to handle numbers. It turns out that the more numerate a person is, the better they understand this kind of risk information. However, the paper by Wright suggested that depicting it graphically doesn't necessarily help less numerate persons. So it's really a struggle for a lot of people. And I would suggest that unscrupulous actors have contributed to distrust in science, including weaponizing health information for their own purposes. A study was done across 5 countries who were surveyed, showing that higher trust in scientists and higher numeracy skill was associated with lower susceptibility to COVID-19 misinformation, which would be, no surprise to us. And susceptibility to misinformation negatively affects people's compliance with public health guidance about COVID-19, such as choosing to be vaccinated or wearing a mask. One approach is what's called cognitive inoculation, which is to front load the public with accurate scientific information in a non-inflammatory way so that when they meet with conspiracy theories or other forms of misinformation, they have some degree of immunity, cognitive immunity against it, and are more inclined to be critical of that information. So back in March, on March 15th, President Trump basically put the country into a type of COVID lockdown of sorts. And that night I was sitting at a birthday party with my niece with about a dozen family members, and they were firing up questions to me about COVID. What was going to happen? What does this mean? So on a whim, I did a Facebook Live video right then and sent it out. Sunday morning, I found that hundreds of people had watched that video and shared it with others. And it gave me this idea that the public, especially Facebook friends, were desirous of getting information about the COVID pandemic. This led to, from March 15th to April 26th of last year, I created 14 Facebook Live videos with an average length of 12.08 minutes, I guess 12 minutes and 8 seconds, to provide clear information about COVID-19, to guide people to appropriate behaviors, and to instill hope. These videos went on to be viewed 12,229 times, which led myself, always curious and scientific, to conduct a 12-item survey sent out via Facebook to my viewers. 77 people responded to the survey. And here are some of the results. So the paper was sent out to you, so you may have seen some of this, but I'm just going to go through some of the findings. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how serious a threat do you think this is? 8.1. So definitely people were very, concerned about this pandemic. How worried are you about getting it? 6.5%, very worried. It turns out in the end, 10% people got COVID, but it looks like, half of people were afraid of getting COVID. So there was a heightened and an elevated sense of anxiety at the time. How about somebody getting COVID? That was like 80%. What percentage of people who get COVID do you think will die? Where is it? 22% said less than 1%, which is the correct answer. It's about 0.6%. But you can see that 70% thought it would be as high as 5%. Well, that would be, an apocalypse if that had happened. So people were very afraid. How confident are you that the government can control the outbreak? 51% were relatively confident. And then in general, has the government done the right thing with implementation of social distancing? Now, mind you, this was in about the end of May or early June, so things were starting to lift a little bit. And 86% of people, 87% agreed that the government had done the right thing. In terms of the economic impact, 76% felt as if the economic impact justified the degree of mitigation. So pretty strong support. And then the COVID is a complex problem. 84% agreed that it's a complex problem and hard to understand. So here's some of this continuing data. This is in graphic form to just show how most people agreed the government had done the right thing. Most people felt as if the economic impact was justified, and most people felt strongly that it was difficult, complex, and difficult to understand. The second set of questions that I looked at had to do with their experience with the Facebook Live videos. 99% found that they were helpful in understanding a complex problem. That was really inspiring to see. Now, there had to be some response bias. You know, the 77 who responded were not entirely, you know, my fans, shall we say, but probably a little bit biased in that direction. And then prior to watching the Facebook Lives, my understanding of epidemiology, you know, was pretty poor, like 75%, slightly to no knowledge, or 53%, slightly to no knowledge of epidemiology. And then since watching them, my epidemiology knowledge improved, much improved or somewhat improved. 90% reported that. So I felt like it was, you know, a successful experience. A couple of other findings were qualitative in nature, where I asked them some questions about what was the most, you know, significant element. And these quotes are really touching. Some very helpful, these are quotes from respondents. Some very helpful ways of explaining the epidemiology in plain language were very helpful for dealing with inquiries. And I'm a healthcare worker. I loved your videos. I wish the mainstream news could give straight facts as well as faith messages. Provided facts in a calm and non-sensationalized or non-politicized manner. Great job. Thanks so much for sharing your knowledge and insight. So helpful to have facts without exaggeration. So much information has a political slant. My gut tells me you're being objective. Now, mind you, this person said my gut, which is not the best basis for evaluating evidence, but I thank this individual for their trust in me. A calm demeanor, didn't involve politics, messages of faith and hope. So I was really, inspired to see this. The question was then asked, what was the greatest benefit that you received? And these were all offered options. It wasn't free, open answer. And the highest score was, I received scientific information in plain language. That's what they appreciated most. And by the way, the Friedman chi-square test on this is a p-value of essentially 0. So the differences between these is there. The second most common response was, I valued the inspirational messages of hope. And then there was a bit of a jump to, it answered my questions, it dispelled rumors, and it equipped me to face the epidemic with confidence. So the take-home message was scientific information in plain language and inspirational messages of hope. This is what people wanted and needed, and this is the opportunity that we have. So those are some of the results from the paper, and I don't have a whole lot more, but I did want to share a couple of thoughts from the Rosenbeek paper, which basically asked the question, this is basically showing a regression, linear regression analysis for susceptibility to misinformation about COVID. So your point estimate of 0, anything above 0, with confidence intervals that stay above 0 would be considered to be statistically significant as a factor that is associated with susceptibility to COVID misinformation. So we'll just jump to this one here at the bottom. If you get your information from social media, it doesn't matter what country you're in, you're going to be inclined toward misinformation about COVID. So social media is a contributor. On the other hand, if you get your information from the World Health Organization, particularly in Spain, you're going to be resistant to misinformation. And the other countries also, the point estimate, although the confidence interval stretched over 0, for the most part, getting information from WHO was protective. Being strong in numeracy, there you go, Jessica, helping people do mathematics is a protective factor against COVID misinformation, and then trust in scientists also. Some of the factors boxed in red show contributors to increased susceptibility to COVID misinformation, including politically right-wing, a perceived status as a minority. Interesting thought there about like vulnerability, et cetera. Trust in politicians' COVID approach. So that's an interesting one to the extent that one totally leans into trusting the politicians. That's considered to be vulnerable to misinformation, which took me by surprise. The others are all pretty much, non-significant. So age, female, education level, trust in the government, trust in journalists were non-significant. So the US was similar to other countries in most of these areas. So in terms of the study that I did, these are the conclusions that I would like to draw. And then I will take a few minutes to answer a couple of questions, and then we'll also try and move into a discussion time together. So scientists, I would suggest from my experience, I was completely struck by how desperate the public was for scientific, trusted, non-sensationalized scientific information during COVID, but equally so, nested within a message of hope. In order to combine, I need knowledge to bank on, but I also need hope to trust that things are going to be okay. So in conclusion, I suggest that scientists need to develop to become better at communicating science to the public. And COVID's been a very unique time because the appetite people have had is insatiable. But even during other times, issues like climate change, issues like, I don't know, genetically modified foods, these are also scientific topics of interest and concern to persons. And I would like to consider, all of you to potentially identify ways to develop online strategies to counteract misinformation and participate in doing what I call cognitive inoculation, not waiting until somebody posts nonsense and then picking a fight with them, because then all you do is cause them to retrench and dig in. But before people start posting things that are not truthful, to send out firm but gentle, scientifically sound messages. To that, I would like to remind you that misinformation is very sticky. So to the extent that you do this respond, they send out a bad piece of information and you quickly respond, sometimes that forces the misinformation to stick to people even more firmly. So sometimes a non-response is called for. Correcting misinformation on social media can address the person sharing the misinformation and the community reading it. I frequently respond to misinformation through social media, not with the one posting it in mind, but asking what would others that might be reading it benefit from? And so I don't pick a fight with the poster, but rather I hopefully try and nudge or influence the readers. Susceptibility to misinformation negatively affects people's compliance with public health guidance. So this is a life and death issue. And I think, the degree to which people have been contributors and almost complicitous with 600,000 lives lost, to me is unacceptable. And I think we need to be aware that it's not just, like a game or something that people can just have fun with, but there's lives at stake. In my study here, I don't know if anybody's behavior actually changed because it was a cross-sectional study and basically they were reflecting on their experience, but they did report it. They did self-report that their understanding of the information changed. So I'll take that as a proxy of positive behaviors as well. I think this project was able to accomplish some level of cognitive inoculation and help people identify and avoid misinformation. And bringing this whole study up to the current situation, I have helped dozens of individuals move from vaccine hesitancy to being vaccinated by using the same approach that I'm advocating in this presentation. And finally, I'd like to just conclude with Ian Barber, who's a friend of he's dead now, but an ASA friend who divided the relationship between science and faith into 5 different types of relationships. And the one that I am most attracted to is what he calls the dialogue approach, where the results of science are taken seriously on their own terms, but then the implications for one's faith experience are considered in dialogue with that science. So this is what I wanted to report on, and these are the questions I want to have for small group discussion. But before, I'd like to take a few minutes to entertain any questions that you have before we break into groups for discussion. Any questions? And feel free to just speak out. We have few enough people. We don't need to, use hand raise or chat or anything. What do you think? Are you persuaded?
Can I be devil's advocate for a second,
Of
Mark?
course, this is a science group. Anything less, you would be unqualified.
I'm just wondering, have you looked at, in general, any studies? Because I will confess I haven't, but just any studies recently on the degree to which people are swayed in general, just in general by scientific information. Because it's my understanding from sociology, from sociologists I've heard talk, that people really often, like, we think we make logical decisions, but we really don't. But I don't have any hard data or studies to cite in that
Yeah.
regard. I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I can't off the top cite any papers to that extent, but yeah, I would say it's widely understood that people don't make logical or rational decisions. And frankly, the approach that I'm using would be consistent with that. It's almost my reputation and the way in which I deliver the message that I expect to nudge these people more than the profundity of my scientific explanation. And I think that's what you saw in the comments. It was like trusted, non-sensationalized science that we can understand with messages of hope. So yeah, I totally agree, Ryan. And I think that's where sometimes as scientists, we want to fall into a very like knockout scientific argument, but very few people are actually needing that. Yeah.
So Mark, thank you for your talk. It's very interesting, and I find that the study just showed that misinformation come from.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's very interesting. I feel the same way. So if people they get the news from social media, always have some misinformation, have a lot of misinformation.
Yeah.
So how about those the media news like the television news?
Yep.
I didn't see you have that category in the study.
Yep, that's a very good point. So a study in Canada demonstrated that persons who viewed what we would call network news were far less susceptible to COVID misinformation than individuals who followed, the cable news networks. And that's both CNN from that perspective and like your Fox News from the other perspective. But yeah, there was a sense that the standard network news or network like established newspapers, people in those categories were far less susceptible to conspiracies.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is a credit to standard journalism. I mean, we all probably get frustrated with the newspapers and the evening news that they're all leaning toward just entertainment, but there's still some evidence that they're striking a much more neutral and a much more objective tone than most of the like cable news or social media or free platforms.
So I just curious about your Facebook, your follower, how big it is, how many people you can affect.
Yeah, my own list of friends is probably about 250. So that 12,000 was because I made these all public and all my Facebook friends shared them with all their friends.
Okay.
From which I received about 400 invitations for Facebook friends, none of which I accepted.
Yeah, my point is that we don't, for me, I don't have much Facebook.
Yeah, no, I
don't think if I put something in the Facebook, anyone will be trust that or notice that.
I've continued to limit Facebook to individuals whom I know personally and whom I'm comfortable sharing my own heart and my own thoughts. So yeah, I would agree. I'm much more cautious in terms of how I use Facebook, but it was just that everybody else shared my videos that allowed it to go so broadly.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments people have?
Yeah, just a comment on social media, Mark.
Yeah.
In my second career, third, whatever, dealing with residents and medical residents and medical students, I was frankly appalled at what kinds of things people would be willing to share on social media, even people who were theoretically scientifically savvy. And by that I mean, if you have a medical student, I mean they're pretty darn smart to have gotten there. and then in the residency programs have medical school under their belt, and you'd think that these people are really scientifically savvy. And yet, what I've seen shared on social media, it just takes my breath away. I think, with all of your training, do you really believe what you just posted? And this was happened in such epidemic proportion, especially at Rocky Vista University, where it became evident that in our orientation for medical students, we actually needed to have a mini course, if you will, on uses of social media and what could be posted there and what should be posted there, and understanding when you post something on social media, even if it's sensationalized science or whatever it is, that's there forever, and that's associated with you and your reputation forever. Oh. And so, it was really kind of a problem, because you think, well, educated, scientifically trained people are going to be really careful about what they put on, and that's not universally true. And so, again, I applaud your posts, and also, by the way, your article in the last ASA Journal. That was really nicely done, on striving to, toward objectivity with people who are scientifically trained, and the responsibility that they have, public responsibility that they have, to put out only information they know is scientifically accurate.
Yeah. Let me just throw out, would you guys like to break into groups of like 4 and just have a good conversation now? Is that okay? Would you welcome that? I mean, there's only 13 of us here, but would you prefer that? That's my preference, my recommendation. Would you welcome that? Okay, and I mistakenly posted all the questions. Please refer to the bottom 3. I'm proposing just the bottom 3 questions. First, what are the consequences of scientific illiteracy in society and the church? What are the things that we can do, that is Christians in science, to address this so we're better prepared in the future? And then what scientific topics do you consider important for the church, and why? So I'm just posting those as possible conversations. So I'm going to just randomly break us up into 3 groups of 4. Well, now we only have 11, so 3, I guess, is okay. So, yeah, we'll go 3 groups of 4, 3. And then, if you need to introduce yourselves, you can do that. And then we'll wrap up at 5 and come back, and I'll give some concluding remarks. Does that sound okay? Mm-hmm. I'm just thinking you all would enjoy working in smaller groups and getting a chance to. So you'll be randomly assigned. So we're going to do 3 groups of 4 automatically assigned. Enjoy your conversation, and you don't have to follow the questions I posed, but if those are helpful, I think that would be good. And then we'll come back and hear from each group just a little bit, and I'll have some concluding remarks about 5 o'clock. Hello, friends. I hope you had a good conversation in your group. Did anybody from the other groups? Maybe I'll give you a comment that stood out. Charlie, did anything in your group stand out that you might share with the rest who didn't have your conversation that we'd enjoy hearing?
Actually, I think you better pick on Ryan, because I did most of the talking, so I'd be biased if I said anything.
Ryan, go ahead.
Well, I'll just be provocative and say we ended our conversation talking about hostage negotiation, and we concluded that in trying to talk science or hostages, it's important to listen to the person on the other end first and understand them and empathize with them before delivering before there's even an opening to deliver our message. Mm.
Did you guys have any thoughts about the consequences, or maybe, just the significance of this issue?
Which issue are you referring to? That's a
scientific illiteracy and misinformation in the church. Well, not so much the scientific illiteracy as the manipulation of information then that's harmful, maybe more so.
Well, one of the things we talked about was the lack of critical thinking in the church or in science or the university or wherever you want to be. Mm-hmm. It's the fact that we have not trained people up to be critical thinkers. To really, why do I believe? What are the apologetics? What are the things that we believe, and why?
Yep.
Instead of getting caught up in the emotion, it is, why do I, critical thinking. I see it at the university here every day, the lack thereof.
Okay, how about, I don't know who was in the other group, but whoever was in neither my group nor Ryan or Charlie's group, who would that be? Can anybody represent their group and share a thought or two? Bill?
I'll unmute here, Mike. Mark. Yeah, I have kind of a hard stop. Believe it or not, I have an HOA meeting going right now.
Okay.
And Linnea is holding forth for us in that meeting.
Okay.
I'm enjoying this way more.
Thank you for joining us, Bill. We'll see you later.
Sure. But no, hey, one thing that you asked about some of the insights that we had in our group, and what are the consequences of scientific illiteracy in the church? And I think we're experiencing that and have experienced it in the past. And one of them, Mark, is polarization. You have people who come in that are absolutely spring-loaded, and with a certain idea, and whether it's a certain idea of the creation evolution controversy or whatever it happens to be, that they're so spring-loaded that they don't want to listen to scientific information that might go against what they had always been taught to believe. And so you end up with a polarization in the church. And again, what can we do to address that problem? And we talked about maybe doing it in some kind of smaller group sessions or something with people that are interested in the church and that particular kind of dialogue. Because if you just kind of throw that out, you get people that are just ready to throw darts at each other from respective sides of the room. And so I found that the best missionaries within the church, so to speak, are those people who have who handle their science well, also handle their scripture well, but also can present those arguments and the various sides with gentleness and respect, just like what First Peter says. Yep. So it's not just presenting the gospel with gentleness and respect, but it's presenting scientific ideas and how those all blend with gentleness and respect as well. And maybe it's a place to start, Mm-hmm. Yeah. But that's kind of where we got and what topics are important for the church. We really kind of camped on those first two issues, though.
And I think your point is well taken, to the extent that probably 75% of the people in the church don't have much interest in sciencey stuff, even. Mm-hmm. And so to kind of impose it on them or sort of force feed it, you almost maybe create more misunderstanding. So yeah, I think your idea of those who have an interest in those topics is a good one. Lisa, do you want to share any nugget from our conversation, and then we'll move toward wrapping up here? Yep. See you around, Bill. Thanks for joining us. Leave whenever you need.
Well, we had Mark in ours, and so he gave us all the correct answers.
George, you're my friend. Come on, don't keep throwing me under the bus. Okay. What do you have to share, Lisa, just as far as, any one or two nuggets maybe from our conversation?
Kind of similar themes that you have to recognize. A lot of people have a lot of fear that if one thing they believe is challenged, their whole Christian faith will evaporate. And so we, like I think Ryan Stryker's group said, along the line, we didn't say it as cool as you guys did, but it's important to listen to the other people. And it's hard when some Christians hold things to be essential that aren't. So you don't want to argue about it, but they want to kick you out of the church over it.
Yeah.
So, and any else in the group want to chime in some more stuff? Because I'm sure I didn't capture everything.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that was all good. Well, today has been a great chance to catch up a little bit. I know we were sort of selling these chapter chats as kind of like happy hour, and so sort of a end of the work day and not taking up people's evenings and weekends. And So I hope that this, shorter period of time, a little bit squeezed in at the end of the day, is to your satisfaction. But did anyone have any general comments about, doing this kind of thing? We're developing the chapter, and we hope to have these kind of events on a quarterly basis. Any good ideas for us moving forward?
How often it will be?
Maybe quarterly, like I said. So like once a year,
quarterly.
once a year will be a ASA celebrity speaker that we'll piggyback on like we did in January. And then once a year, and I've just put it in the chat, we'll have our chapter more business meeting. So May 25th, same time, 4 in the afternoon, we're going to have, I think that's what we've set. We're going to have our business meeting. And if Noel, as our president, has anything to say, I'll let him share that. And then hopefully it's not all business, because we want that meeting to be also some engagement and spiritual, fun like we've done today. Did you want to say anything more about that, Noel? You're muted.
Yeah, I don't have the page of my notes right in front of me with the date, but that sounds about right. And we are interested in how we can serve you through the organization and help encourage you with your walk with Christ, and also the added walk of being a Christian and a scientist or someone in STEM.
Mm-hmm.
And we're very open to hearing suggestions, and even if you don't have a solution, if there's something that we can come alongside you with, please let us know.
Yep. So today I've tried to just pique our curiosity to say, how do we apply our own area of scientific interest and expertise to bring encouragement, information, knowledge to fellow followers of Christ, in this case, during a crisis, the COVID pandemic, but even in the normal, routines, there's also a need. So I hope each of you feels a little more encouraged in how to apply your science, to not shrink back and be afraid that science is an enemy of faith, or that we as scientists are enemies of our church brothers and sisters. So appreciate everybody's participation and joining in today. So like I said, we'll have business meeting May 25th. You'll be getting information, and come and go as you're able. And then in August, we're going to be having a welcome back to school event. I hope we can do that in person somewhere. I'm sorry about people like Ryan or Bill Kearney who are, enjoying our fellowship time, that there will be some in-person events that may or may not have Zoom functions. But Ryan, know that you're always welcome to join any of our events as long as you're on the mailing list and stuff. So just bear. So May we got something, August we have something, in the fall we'll have something, and then in January. So we'd like to do 4 times a year for our chapter. And then there's other ASA events that do happen. I know Noel's been on a couple Saturday morning discussions too. So just keep note of those and be encouraged in your walk with the Lord and in your role as a follower of Christ in your scientific field, and also a minister of scientific information in your church family. So thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.